Couple stream starty things just to make sure that you can hear me when I actually start talking. But hi, I'm Nels, and this is something I like to call "Is it art?" He said, as though he's done this many times before, and this isn't the very first time he's talking about games as art and Warframe in particular. So what I want to do is go through. I know that could have been better. I've been doing this for a week, so we'll edit it out in post, like it's not live. Um, what I want to do is go through 12 different categorical elements for art that I use to try and determine whether something is art. And as I talk about the researchy theoretical bits, one thing I hope will happen is that I learned something new, and hopefully it's interesting and maybe entertaining. My little streamy bits here that tell me how things are going, or if someone's trying to like violently get my attention. Okay, might be working now. Okay, also I'm thinking about all these like performance bits, like my mouse is on the seam of a table for a game that's really high action and run and jump and shoot. So yeah, it's been probably years since I really seriously played Warframe here on the PC, but we've got like a pretty good setup. When I had a lot more time, I would leave this on and do trade chat, so there could be something to say about negotiation and how you negotiate prices for things and do that really well. That could be a fun talk, and certainly since I've spent most of my research time looking at problematic gaming and how do we take games that might have different elements like in-game events and lots of different resources and nodes that you unlock and all sorts of gating and different things like that. How do you take that and play in a way that is balanced so that it's not just fun in that you're you know playing the game, but like it's nice in that you can do it and do all the other things you've got in your life. And that stuff is complicated and different for everybody. And this is a good point to say, like there's a disclaimer in the about, but nothing that I say here, if I ever talk about that sort of stuff, is medical advice. I'm not a doctor or a mental health clinician. I've worked with a bunch of those folks in putting together research, but the more you get to know me, the more you might realize I might have interesting things to say about games, but you don't want to take advice from me. So like one of the nice things I like to do is just kind of see what's going on. We have like a time locked event here. We've got different quests. We've got different invasions, which are these time limited sort of quests. All this stuff to do and all this stuff that's going on kind of simultaneous. And these sorties, which are these high level things, so sniper only. The pinnacle of the mobile defense, excavation. We could probably do this. Not on this current Warframe, because we just got this Nezha Prime when we were dropping in like a few months ago just to see what was going on. Because Nezha is traditionally like one of my favorite frames. We can look at the profile and see if that's like the one, if it has overtaken the Ash in terms of my very favorite. You see here, like, there's also a lot probably from a research standpoint to say about sexism in games and toxicity. One of the things that's really interesting, I think, and that one who's curious about this, like could try pick a name that suggests that you may be female and see how the interactions within online games change. If you feel, that you are ready for a little bit of toxicity, because while it's gotten better in the last few years and we've made strides as a community, this is one of those things that my students will tell me, and actually we had some students talk about this just last month. Their experiences as women gaming, and I can't get too deeply into that, but for my part, I can say that having done this has been extremely illustrative, both from a research perspective, but also as a player, as someone who's just trying my best to understand where people are coming from and not be an a-hole. You can look at some of this stuff. There's some stuff here that I could have really micromanaged a lot harder. But one of the things I like to do after having spent this much time in something like Warframe is just play for fun, like follow what's interesting to me. So I don't plan to do any really hardcore farming, although one of the things we want to do is hop into this mode called Sanctuary Onslaught, because we've got this cool Warframe and maybe we want to level it up. And so one of the first categorical elements of art that I like to talk about, and this is based on a bunch of stuff, but a good place to start for just an easy, nice book to read through if you want to look into how games are art, because I think we've gotten past the point of, are they art? They've been in the Smithsonian. It stands to reason that there are some factors to games that we could call art. So let's look at what particularly Warframe is doing, because while we can counterbalance that with some things that may be a little bit problematic, while we can say that there are certain things that not even talking about stuff that makes it challenging to balance, but there are some things that, especially as we start to ask questions like how games are art, we also have to ask questions about, are there things that developers are doing that, as with other forms, diminish some of the good things that they're doing? Are there things that photographers or writers or movie directors do that diminish the form? And, we'll talk a little bit about boosters and games for a service and that sort of thing. What I just snagged from the marketplace there will help it take less time for me to try and do what I want to do. And so there's a longer conversation, I think, that's beyond the bounds of art to have there. But sometimes when you purchase some of those things, that direct pleasure, that first categorical element, and we're getting right into it. It seems like this might be loud, so what I'll do in a second here, and we're getting a little clipping as we load in. I hope there's not too much performatively. Warframe has been really tricky about actually letting me, and I'm not sure you'll be able to hear me at all, so let me just adjust the level of volume so that I'm pretty confident that you can hear me. Just volume mixer. And we haven't yet put on one of the signature abilities of the Nezha that lets me absorb a lot of damage and really effectively get in there with this sort of melee setup that I've got. I took a look at this ribbon that I have attached. Ribbons are these little things you can attach to your different weapons to give them sort of added effects. And this is, for folks who know Warframe, range, critical damage, and critical chance ribbon, which I feel really lucky to have. It's maybe one of the most valuable ones that I have that I won't probably foreseeably ever trade. And that's one of the nice things, like having gone in when I was younger and done things to, like done a lot of the trading and actually learned a lot in the trading game here in Warframe about, taking theoretical negotiation up to, like a practical sense. I have that ability to just, if I want to play and have a good time and have some of that direct pleasure, I can just like hop into the market and grab like a little affinity boost, and it's not too big a deal. If we were a little more confident, we'd be doing, more on Warframe for a while. We could have grabbed like a longer form affinity boost or resource boost or something like that, and we might snag a resource boost. And yeah, I don't know that I would sort that all under direct pleasure, but that's the sort of things we would normally call fun. And this, like, if you can find different game modes in here that let you do things that could be interesting to you. So, I mean, I definitely think that that's one thing we can say for Warframe, is that the in-game can give you that. You've also got the idea of, and this is usually applied to people who are making the art. There's this idea among, aestheticians, like sort of people who study art in different mediums, of skill and virtuosity. So if you're like a really particularly skilled painter, if you are a really tenured musician or concert pianist or, violinist or something like that, you have this sort of virtuoso element to what it is you're doing. And I think it's entirely possible that some of the coders and maybe some of the artists and folks who are looking at the design of this, and maybe even, if there's an art to community building in the early days of Warframe, perhaps that was an element. But here you also get this interesting element in all games, or well, maybe not all, but in many, like where the players can have different things they're doing that show off a certain level of skill and virtuosity. But take that another step further, and all of these games that allow, say, like a Twitch streamer to hop on and, we call, YouTube creators and Twitch creators, like there's this term content creator. So you've got some folks who have, I would say, like a virtuoso level of talent in not only like being able to like play a game. As you can see, like I'm just in this mode walking back and forth, hitting things with my very powerful sword so that I can get some levels on this Nezha. Like what I'm doing in terms of play, maybe not the most skilled stuff. However, like when I watch, say, some of the folks that I follow and that I like as streamers, say like I really like Viking Blonde, Will. He's a pretty entertaining guy to watch, and I think a lot of how he is presenting himself in terms of not only his own personality and, like a level of maybe virtuoso emceeing, or, not really acting, but maybe more emceeing. Okay, so I'm still kind of getting into the controls. I'm not a virtuoso at this. Or, folks like, Twitch recommended me one of my partner's very favorite actresses, Felicia Day. And so I thought that was cool, and I would be able to tell my partner that. And you can tell there's this level of knowledge and effectiveness in acting. There's that virtuoso skill in the Twitch streaming, which really cool, like, to start to think about. And I'm sure that if Roger Ebert, and any of the folks who leveled some of these really big criticisms to games heard stuff like that, they might be rolling over in their graves, and saw me here swiping like Grenier with my Docrum sword scythe thing, talking about this stuff. It would be, to them, utterly ridiculous. But one of the things that, has been coming up in the stream is, right now, Grandma might not play video games. Grandma might have some biases against playing video games. But in a few years, Grandma's going to know all the secret stuff about vanilla WoW. Grandma's going to know how to play better than you. And when we get to that point, when there's that broader social understanding of the different levels of aesthetics in games, I think we get to a stronger place to really talk about, in a really thoughtful and reasoned fashion, how it is that, even something like streaming can be an aesthetic that, I don't know, it's kind of cool to try and understand as art. Okay. All right. So that's two different categories. Like, we've got the direct pleasure, we've got the skill and virtuosity, usually of creators, but how we look at creator is interesting. We've also got style. And so visual style, this is pretty photorealistic, but we've got, like, if we just take a moment, we're in this weird simulation here, but we've got this neat, like, graphic. There seems to be some sort of, like, language that the creators have come up with, so almost like a token-esque sort of world building that we've got. Like, just visually, there are things happening. In terms of story, there is a sort of style to the story where we have, in this game mode, been invited into a simulation to basically shoot things and blow things up. And occasionally that guy will yell at us and say, like, kill harder, kill faster. Right. Like, it's, arguably thin, but, arguably it makes sense. What you've also got that I think is really interesting, we have done a lot in terms of shooting games. This is pretty tried and true territory for the visual simulations, and not just like in-game simulations, but sort of like the embodiment in worlds that we have seen, whether it's Call of Duty or Proteus. This is a kind of experience that we have explored in some different ways, and will continue to do so. And there are more, I think, especially one that I would love to talk more about is like games poetry. This is what I, as a dev, when I can make my own games on my own and not have to worry about getting paid and that sort of thing. Like, I love to make like these sort of poems. Let's just look at the damage. Okay, well, for coming in without a lot of equipment, I'd like to be doing more. Oh, and I jumped right into that conduit. How are we doing on level, though? Okay, we're getting up there. I think the affinity boost is helping. Oh, I see. So I'm still getting used to the energy mechanics again. I was for a little while playing this on Xbox, and so there was a different controller setup. In terms of style, I guess like the thing I would finish with is just kind of thinking about how in this like aesthetic of experience, like what are we doing experientially? Is Warframe, and especially when they came out, were they doing something unique and playing on some of those tropes that we already had for these sort of shoot 'em up games to do something new? I think you can make that argument that like what they were, like doing in terms of free to play. And I don't know if like a marketing model can qualify as art. Like, what do you think? It's a conversation, like a lot of these to be had, that like a lot of these conversations around games will get further fleshed out as we go. But I'm not sure that I want to give that one to Warframe. Visually, maybe. Some other like aesthetic elements that we understand and could use current aesthetic theories to bring some clarity to, like, could be used to talk about that. But in terms of just the experience and stylistically, is it really like adding to the pot? I'm not sure. So like and that gets into one of the other criteria for art, like novelty and creativity. That would be our fourth criteria. Again, I don't know how much like marketing sort of free to play novelty or art, choice. Like, I don't know how much that gets into like artistic choice. Although I'm sure that as we get to understanding this a bit more, we can start to see how some ways of presenting games will give more leeway to creativity and style. These last two criteria. And again, these are discussions to be had about it, but I don't know that it fits. Like, I don't know that I'm willing to give that one to Warframe, especially as we start to look, like at the sort of systemic, like experiential ways we're trying to keep people playing. And Warframe has a lot of different ways in which it's not necessarily creating like, or an experience where you're really learning something or learning something about yourself. There's a lot that's meant to be adrenal and exciting, though at some point it's also designed, I think I would say intentionally, to be something that can be repeated. And so when we get to the grind mechanics, which I do have some plans on how to broach that with Warframe in particular, but with games in general. When you get to the point of grind mechanics, oops, okay, so now we're in trouble. We're leveling this up so we don't have our full ability to withstand damage, and I'm still learning how to cast some of these different Warframe abilities effectively. What I'm really doing here is something that I have absolutely done before with other Warframes that I'm trying to level up here. You've got the Gara, the newer character. Someone's probably just picked up that Warframe and is leveling them up. And right now, there are people who are trying to pick up that Warframe that's doing this spinny thing, and they're farming. So, I mean, at some point, you can use grind and farm interchangeably, but they are really repetitively doing stuff, and like that farm and grind really implies it's not necessarily the enjoyable parts of the experience. And so, as we get more discerning about things like art, we may become more critical of that and have better language with how we avoid some of that. Okay, so I've got this shotgun. It's not fully upgraded here. Oh, I can detonate it myself. Neat. So it is a shotgun that launches rockets, basically. And it's a new version of it that I haven't played much with, and I'm kind of excited to. Okay, so we primarily need to get some more efficiency on this Warframe, and we are at rank 28. 30 is the cap, so we probably only need maybe 1 or 2 more rounds of this, and then we'll be good to hop out, try to let folks know that we're doing that beforehand so no one gets messed up. I think part of, virtuosity in these games is knowing... Oh, that's a nice fire rate. Knowing, in social games how to treat people well, how to not be a jerk. And I think that too, there's something to be said, especially if we do get into, toxicity and sexism and trolling. That is one element to this experience that as players, as our own sort of virtuosos, we need to start to understand. And, again, as like Grandma starts to be the person who knows a lot about games, Grandma will probably teach you how to not be a jerk in video games. I hope. That's the goal, anyway. Okay, so we've got that cool thing. We can put out this like field of spikes and sort of spike up some of these dudes, and that's lasting about 12 seconds. I think when we get it fully modded, though, it's not going to last quite so long. All right. So, and I guess some of how I'm, talking about the criticism of games in terms of not just style, but also, things like community and design. When we get to the point where we have really well-developed critical institutions, when we've got people, and we do in games have some folks who are cool to listen to, like who have good opinions and put good thinking and clever analysis into how we do some of this stuff, like unpack aesthetics and unpack style. we'll be better off the more we have of that, but right now the way it's set up is to be financed really through sales of games. Like a lot of games journalism relies on marketing budgets of games. Oh, let's go help this person. We've got that instant revive from like a sort of this dude that we can summon, who is kind of our dude. And we are at max rank. Cool. So we don't need to do any more rounds of this hyper repetitive XP farming. And having watched, like the academic side of this for some time, we'll just let these people damage us because that will increase the amount of shielding we get. That shield gives us like an invulnerability for a little while that will just soak up damage and then turn it into a shield, which I like, which I think is awesome. Whoops. Yeah, maybe I need to rebind that so it's harder for me to do it wrong. I'm still getting used to a new laptop keyboard as well. What I've personally watch, though, is some of my favorite games journalists um, essentially do world class work, like really amazing work that is in this field that is so brand new. So, I mean, um, very few people can do it, should be getting paid as well as anyone doing journalism in the New Yorker or the New York Times. Just basically starving, not have any way to continue doing it because there's, like either no good funding model. So I'll just let this person know that I plan to peace out, and they've let me know that too. So that's cool. Like, I love that this person has this hot soup has said good games, so I know that they want to be done, and I'm not going to hop in and maybe be one person fewer, making this mission so much harder. Let's see. Yeah, we maxed out everything. And what's funny, like if we're talking about farms, one of the things you can do when you max out a Warframe or a gun or a sword is reset it so you can do the exact same thing over again. So you can max out again. So in terms of promoting farming and grinding, incredibly clever. Very designed to make a smaller amount of content last much longer. And this is a game as a service, so people have been playing it for long periods of time. But when you're doing that, like, if that cleverness had been applied to finding ways to make the experience satisfying, well, it wouldn't be very profitable for a game like this because, if you are just having a good experience, feeling like you got the ideal experience from something, and say even it takes you a shorter amount of time being another critical component to grinds and farms, like how much time does it take? If you can have a really good experience in a really short amount of time, you'll go and play other games. But you won't necessarily keep coming back to make further purchases on the same game just because it was satisfying or a good experience. When we put all of our effort towards trying to maximize that amount of time, it, I think, falls into a category of design that we're not going to see less of because it's been called, the most exciting, like games as a service is the most exciting new way of making games if you are a board member at a tech company or a stockholder or stakeholder or someone trying to profit off of it. However, as consumers, and especially as younger generations of gamers find themselves with more priorities that aren't gaming and less time to do it, one of the things, that you're seeing my generation start to talk about is like, how do we balance this so that we can get experiences in a more reasonable amount of time? And the more that we can explore that critically and explore what that means for the nature of experience or mediated experience, like game experience, the better our games, and especially if art is a reflection of life and our culture more broadly, the better we'll be as a society and maybe even as a people. You're looking at the kinds of things we get from games. And that's not to say that really repeatable experiences don't have a place out there. Really fun experiences have always had a place in, theme parks, in, zoos, in a lot of the attractions we find out in the world. We want to add more elements of fun to those and to games, but we also want to have a language for how we as consumers get at those responsibly. So for this particular stream, I think we'll just get to 6 out of the 12 criteria. We'll go for half. The final one is representation. So like here, you can see I have this Warframe, this dude here that I can customize. So let's go to like a fresh customization thing. This is the default look for the Warframe. You can see like here, I've not only adjusted the colors, but I have different helmets for this character, which is pretty cool. I have different skins for the rest of the body, and I could even pick up more if I wanted to look at, what, that body or that helmet would add to what I'm doing. I really enjoy this look, but let's just go ahead and mix and match some of these. So let's go with like the prime skin of the Nezha, which has a cool back piece and, a cool, they call it the throwing chakram. But let's randomize the colors. And see there's like an energy, a flame energy that can surround this Warframe, so that energy can be really fun to mess with. And this is one of the areas that I, really enjoy. And I like picking up different colors. It looks like I've picked up some different holiday colors. I've picked up one from a trader who occasionally comes in. And when we're talking about representation, there are many different factors that we are getting into. For instance, in cinema, like, are we representing different perspectives and different lives? Are we representing, say, right now we're looking a lot at Asian American and Pacific Islander heritages and pride, especially in connection to, and well, with the support of the Black Lives Matter movement, we're looking at the sorts of stories and experiences of different groups of people that enough of the population may not understand that it's important to get in there and see. Pardon me, I'm going to take a sip of water. It's important to get in there and explore that slice of life, and that's one of the main purposes of art, is to look at something that we may not have been able to see before, to understand a story and a mode of experience. We'll get into like maybe imagining further stories through that and experience, stuff like cosplay fits into some later categories. So the blue fire is pretty neat, but actually let's just randomize this and see what happens. We can also just see what it is to be this unique avatar within a world. And so the research that I really draw on here that I think is really fascinating would come from maybe a lot of Nick Yee's work on embodiment. And so if you look at stuff like Nick Yee's, he has the Proteus effect, which he explored for several years, and then wrote the book, The Proteus Paradox. And let's just look at, so we've got like the Necros. We could be exploring the world in this sort of Reaper, we've got this big scary scythe, and this Reaper body. It's a little terrifying, and actually I don't want to do that. And interestingly enough, like some of the skills that this character has, they follow this theme. You can terrify people. You can desecrate bodies to create more loot, which is one of the main reasons that people will want to have like a Necros, is so that they can create more loot. But the theme to that ties into the overall aesthetic, which is pretty neat. The Trinity is a major healing character, and we have a unique skin and helmet for the Trinity. And I'll just look at maybe one or two more of these. Like, you've got some different options again for how you want to look when you are this healer going through the world. And so you have not only visual stylistic aesthetics, if we want to go back to style, that tie into some of these themes, but these procedural aesthetics. And so procedurality, which really, you could just say like the game system, but procedurality is a term that was used by Ian Bogost in his book Persuasive Games. And I could do whole episodes on breaking down different elements discussed within persuasive games because they apply to so much of how we critically unpack games. So if we're talking again about the criticism and the fact that we have different critical institutions, that we have folks who have been doing that work, absolutely can imply that games are an art. And I think as you get folks who do talk critically about Warframe, as you get folks who look at the stylistic aesthetics, and not only visual aesthetics, or audio or design aesthetics, but also like these overall procedural aesthetics, and whether all those elements are fitting together, you can certainly make a case that Warframe, a game as a service, a game that is largely about farming, is art. When you start to talk about farming, you can maybe this is how we'll see this progress, we might start to talk about whether or not certain games are good art or problematic art, because absolutely there are aesthetically problematic, very popular pieces of art, like Game of Thrones, where you've got a hugely, terrifically popular show that is bringing in sexual abuse in a way that even the author does not, when you're looking at the show in many different, like capacities. And so how do we acknowledge that something is problematic in different ways and still appreciate it? And I think one of the big things is to actually acknowledge that it is problematic. You can have, and there are pieces of art out there right now that people absolutely consider to be art, but also consider to be problematic. So at what point do you, take some of that and, there may be a point at which you decide something is no longer redeemable. And certainly there are things that I've walked away from. And I have made that decision for myself at times when Warframe in particular was not something that I could personally continue to play. And that certainly had a lot to do with me personally, but also I would argue could have been tied to some of the things that Warframe itself could be doing better in terms of everything from toxicity in the community and reporting, which is absolutely something that I want to look at. Everything from toxicity to like excess and farming and grindy mechanics, and what sorts of tools I might have used just in a, not mental health sense, not like a medical sense, but just as someone playing these games. What did I do as a researcher, researching this stuff to try and play it a little bit better for me? So we just got this Loki Verve skin, and I just want to check it out. Oh, we've still got the Loki Prime helmet. Let's put on the Loki Verve helmet. Okay. It's a little goofy, but, maybe we can make use of this. I like the arm blade things we've got going on here. That's kind of cool. And I like the symmetry of these leg plates. Let's see. I've got kind of a theme that I like. It's the white and the black and the pink. So let's see how these colors work. And what we are doing is just like customizing how we look in this world. Like how are we representing ourselves, and what kind of experience are we having in a world punctuated by spaceships and two different forms of energy. That's neat. Just like two different forms of emissive. Oh, so we can blend them. Oh, neat. Is that what I'm seeing? That we can blend them? That's pretty cool. Oh. It's kind of fun to get into the customization. And I would say, in terms of our ability to represent ourselves in this funky world, you could absolutely make the case that Warframe does qualify as art. So, really, we're not looking at being just on or off, like something is art or is not art. What we want to start to do with games, if we're going to move conversations like this forward, is understand what some of these factors are and have conversations about it and start to decide for ourselves if some of these things that we like are absolutely going above and beyond, and maybe separating it from just like, I like this because, and trying to be as retrospective and thoughtful about it as we can. Like, are there things it could be doing better? Because you find, and this may be an advantage of having a game as a service, the better informed the consumers, the big customers they have, the big community they have. Excuse me, sorry about that. The more we start to talk about what we would like, and ways that we think in meaningful, aesthetically powerful ways these things can become better, the more ongoing developers and big projects like Warframe, the folks behind it might listen and might make some of those changes to not necessarily just become art. That's not everyone's goal, and it doesn't have to be, but to see what they can learn from it and see how they themselves might decide they want to do certain things better. So let's check how long this stream has been. It's been about 45 minutes, but I feel like it's gone through a lot of topics, and really all we did was play one round of or one game of, maybe, was it 8 or 9 rounds of Sanctuary Onslaught to level up a character. We were just leveling up, grinding, farming, and yet we still found things that we could talk about in terms of art. And so one of the goals, if this is a show that has any interest, like looking at whether games are art and how, not whether, we know that they are, but like how they are, what may start to happen is, as we play through these games just in a for fun way, we can start to encounter and see different ways that we can talk about this and deepen our understanding of some of these categorical elements, and maybe, in terms of criticism, find new ways to talk about the medium. So anyway, thanks for watching. I don't think I'll just, I feel like this was fun. Yeah, we'll leave it there. Bye.